That's great, thank you. So yes, today we're going to talk about the PRESS project, which focuses on reducing barriers to SWAT adoption. This is a range of practical resources focusing on recruitment and retention, SWATs. Next slide, please, Catherine. This is an unusual project because it was funded jointly by the Health Research Board, TMRN, who's hosting this webinar today, and in the UK, the Medical Research Council, National Institute for Health Research Trial Methodology Research Partnership. It's a bit of a mouthful, and it was unusual because we went in to submit actually two grant applications, one to the TMRN and one to the TMRP. Francis Sheely led on the grant to the TMRN in Ireland, and I led the grant to the TMRP in the UK. So we thought long and hard about about the best way to do it, and in the end we kind of split it into two and then jointly worked together. So the research team was based all over the UK and Ireland, with myself and Francis leading. We've got colleagues at the universities of Aberdeen. I should probably have added one in Sweden as well, because Sean Truick, he's now got a post at Aberdeen and at Uppsala University in Sweden. We also have some fantastic patient and public involvement partners, Philip Bell, Michelle Pelpone, and Camille Sternwick, who were fantastic in supporting the work and influencing the direction of it as well. Next slide, please, Kathleen. So you all know about randomised controlled trials. They're the bedrock of evidence-based healthcare. And this is because they are the fairest tests for testing treatments, where people are randomly assigned to different groups, which means that we minimise bias. They lead to reliable results by comparing groups, so we can confidently say whether a treatment or intervention causes an effect rather than that happening by chance. They help us to make better decisions by providing us with strong evidence that helps researchers, doctors, policymakers to choose the best treatments as well as other interventions. But there's a problem. And the problem, well, there are a couple of problems actually, which tend to focus around failure to successfully recruit and retain participants. These tend to be the biggest challenge that trial teams face. So when you look at the global evidence, across all types of trials in different areas, academia as well as industry, about 80% of all trials face recruitment delays. This is where trial teams fail to enroll on time, so they either need extensions or adding in new sites. And then if you delve a little bit deeper, between 31 and 55% of trials actually end up globally being discontinued because of poor recruitment. Aside from recruitment, there's also a problem with retention and missing data. So in general, about 89% of all trials report some form of missing data. And again, a smaller proportion, about 18% of trials have data missing, where about 20% of 20% of participants or more have partly missing data, which actually has a huge implications in terms of being able to answer the research question that they're intending to answer. Next slide, please. And this has significant impacts on the trial, but also wider societal and economic impacts as well. So most of you will be very struck. Well, all of us will have lived through the COVID-19 pandemic, and as one of the largest research programs, which was led from the UK, was called the Recovery Trial. And it's a trial platform where they tested many different treatments for COVID. And they found that one of the treatments called dexamethasone, which is a really cheap steroid that can be found anywhere in the world, in any hospital in the world, was actually really effective in treating people who are hospitalized with COVID-19. And what some colleagues of mine did was that they looked at all the trial sites involved in the recovery trial that were involved in the dexamethasone arm of that trial, and they found that most of the sites recruited, but of the sites that recruited, they range between 15%, recruiting 15% of all potentially eligible participants, right up to 85% of all potentially eligible participants. And they calculated that if they had increased, if the sites had increased, as typically recruit about 50% of all potentially eligible participants, about 3,000 patients' lives would have been saved just in the dexamethasone arm alone from people being able to receive the treatment faster. So there's a significant human cost in terms of not being able to quickly answer a question to be able to get a definitive answer about what works or what doesn't work. A PhD student of mine, Nasser's Geckers, also did some work using the same data from the recovery trial, and he worked out that there was a potential net benefit of £14 million, which is about 18 million euros, in terms of net benefit per loss per trial delay, which is a huge amount of economic impacts. There are also additional impacts on poor recruitment and retention. So scientifically, it reduces statistical power and increases the risk of type 2 errors, where you conclude that there is no effect when in fact there is an effect of the treatment, but the sample size is too small for us to answer the question properly. There's also the ethical question about exposing participants to risk or to treatments without social value. So you can't actually tell them whether or not the treatment that you gave them helps them or harms them. This leads to significant research waste that's been described as a scandal. So it wastes the time of participants, funders, trial teams, and it wastes resources as well. And there are also increased costs from slow recruitment, because it takes, you need to pay more people, you need to use more resources. And often in the UK, where trials are failing to recruit, the funder in the UK, the major funder is the National Institute for Health Research, has pulled trials because they've not been able to recruit properly. And then, of course, there's a clinical and life-saving aspects of it, where it delays adopting effective life-saving treatments and the continuation of harmful treatments. Next slide, please. So this next slide will talk about what is a SWAT, which is an approach that we're using to test different strategies to improve recruitment and retention. Okay. It does not seem to be working. The video does not seem to be working, which is fine. So a SWAT is basically means a study within a trial, which is a strategy that's tested within an ongoing host trial. So if you've got a trial, for example, like the recovery trial, they could test different strategies for recruiting participants. For example, sending different information leaflets, or using telephone reminders, for example, where they will test whether or not, if you use one certain type of strategy like a leaflet, would it improve recruitment or retention. It's nested in the trial. It tests trial process outcomes, so not clinical outcomes. So it's focused specifically on testing whether or not you can improve the process of a trial. A SWOT can be randomized or non-randomized. So what you can do is you can do a qualitative SWOT, which is very meaningful in its own way, but often we focus on randomized SWOTs because you can get an effect size to see what works. What we also like to see is to test these SWOTs, not just in one trial and in one patient population, but they can be tested across different trials, so multiple trials, so that you find out whether, if you're testing a strategy for reminding patients, for example, does it work in this patient group and this patient population and in this trial, as well as these other trials. So it's really important to kind of get a sense of whether the strategy works across multiple trials. So that's the basic kind of layout of a SWOT. It's a shame the video isn't working, but hopefully that will help. And we've got questions at the end as well. If we move on to the next slide, please, Kathleen. So in terms of the existing evidence on SWATs, there have been two major systematic reviews looking at recruitment and retention strategies, which is SWATs. The first paper, which is Strategies to Improve Recruitment, Randomised Trials, the current paper was published in 2018, and this identified 68 papers testing different strategies to improve recruitment in SWATs. They found that the quality of the evidence was pretty low, and there were just 3 strategies that were supported by high certainty evidence according to grade. There's a sister paper, which was led by Katie Gillies, which is Strategies to Improve Retention in Randomised Trials. And for that review, they found 70 papers testing strategies to improve retention. The quality of the evidence was actually really even poorer. And they found that there were no strategies that were supported by high certainty evidence. We're currently in the process of finalising, or we're just about to publish the update to the Cochrane retention recruitment review. So the strategies to improve recruitment. So we've updated the 2018 paper to find out whether or not we have more strategies that improve recruitment. And in this update, we found 91 papers and 40 new studies. In the 2018 paper, so the last review, they found that of the 5 strategies that were found to have high certainty evidence, only 2 were effective. And the first one was, if you design a trial that's an open trial, so people know what they're getting, you're more likely to have an increase, a 10% increase, than if the trial was blinded. So open trial versus blinded trial led to an increase in recruitment by 10%. The other thing that they found that was effective was telephone reminders. So if you phone up someone who you've invited to take part in a trial by letter, but who you've not heard from, if you speak to them, you're more likely to get an increase in recruitment by 6%. So these are the only 2 things that were found to be effective. And unfortunately, in this review update, we found the exact same thing. So again, only 2 strategies. But we found lots of papers and lots of different strategies. Next slide, please, Catherine. So the conclusions in the 2018 review was that the literature on interventions to improve recruitment to trials has plenty of variety but little depth. So there were lots of different strategies that were tested, but very little that was usable in terms of definite strategies that were effective. And this is the same thing we found in the current update. So of the different of the studies that we identified, 70% of the SWAT came from single studies, which means that we couldn't get definitive answers. And so the thing that we've really been pushing since then is that we need less innovation and more replication. So more of the strategies need to be tested across multiple trials. So based on this work and on other work as well, we've identified that there's an urgent need for more SWOT replications so that we can build high quality evidence. There's also a fantastic couple of pieces of work that was done, Priority 1 and Priority 2, both of which were funded through the HRB TMRN, and they've identified recruitment and retention priorities that could be tested for future evaluation. Most of the strategies from Priority 1 and Priority 2 were not randomised, whereas we've already identified that there's a need to identify specific recruitment strategies that could be tested in a randomised way. So that's what we wanted to focus on. As part of this, Implement SWATs, which is a program of work that I'm undertaking as part of my NIHR Advanced Fellowship and the Trial Forge SWAT Network, which we host at the Trial Forge SWAT Centre here at York, initiated a piece of work to identify high priority evaluation targets, so strategies that we could test using randomised SWATs. So we started off by looking at the NIHR Health Technology Assessment Library. So NIHR publishes or has done up until recently, all of its funded trials and provide a huge amount of detail in the report, so we know what strategies have been used by different trial teams, what worked and what didn't work. So we extracted data on existing on strategies that have been used in real life trials first, and then we mapped those strategies to the Cochrane Recruitment Review, the Cochrane Retention Review, and then there's another systematic review looking at economic evaluations alongside SWATs, and then Priority 1, Priority 2, and then there were a couple of major SWAT programs of work, MRC Start and Prometheus, which had published findings. So we've mapped the existing strategies that have been used across all of these different sources of data. And then we undertook iterative ranking. So this is conducted by the prioritization working group to rank which strategies should be prioritized. And then we got stakeholder input. So we collaborated with patient and public involvement partners to make sure that it was relevant. Next slide, please, Catherine. And then what we found was that originally I think we wanted to prioritize 5 recruitment strategies and 5 retention strategies, but we decided we couldn't drop the 6th recruitment strategy because it was just it's really important. And we haven't numbered these strategies because specifically because different groups who do trials will be working with different populations and different strategies might appeal. So we haven't ranked them. So the first question focuses on for recruitment, focuses on the use of patient and public involvement to improve recruitment. The second one looks at the use of information videos to improve recruitment. The third one looks at postal invitations and reminders improve recruitment. There's also a question about, does embedding qualitative research in trials help to improve recruitment? And then there's another one about, does targeting underserved groups improve recruitment? And finally, monetary incentives, which are often used in trials. We wanted to kind of know that do these incentives help to improve recruitment? For retention, you'll see that patient and public involvement features again. This was a strong kind of theme that fell across both sides. So for retention, it was does patient and public involvement in follow-up methods improve recruitment? The second one was looking at does flexibility in collecting data from your trial participants improve retention rates? The third one was looking at do participant reminders, so multi-mode, which means so for example sending letters versus text messages or telephone reminders improve recruitment, and does it increase recruitment if you combine these? And then financial and monetary incentives, again, are used for both recruitment and retention often. So we wanted to find out whether or not they increase retention rates. And then there's the use of data, routine data as well, which was another question. We've reported this list of 11 priority SWOT questions on the Trial Forge website, and you can download it. What we want to highlight today is that whilst we've got the broader questions, so the 6 recruitment and 5 retention questions, within each of the broader questions, there are specific questions as well that each team can actually choose to answer. So there's quite a lot of flexibility as well. Next slide, please, Kathleen. I'm now going to hand over to Francis, who will talk specifically about the PRESS project.
Thanks, Edra. And so just to continue on then, so this is where the idea then for the PRESS grant came from. We said, well, how can we enable trial teams to do more SWATs? And, we know designing a trial, conducting a trial, reporting it, they're lengthy processes, they're expensive, and sometimes it's an extra ask to also embed a SWAT. So we wanted to make this process easier so that we can get this information, to finally make a decision on, does this particular retention strategy work? Does this particular recruitment strategy work? So to do that, we thought we'd develop some SWAT protocols and resources for each of the prioritised 11 recruitment and retention strategies. And as Ed was saying there, even though they're broadly thematic, there are different SWAT questions or different research questions for each SWAT that would be under each of those 11 as well. And so we'll come to some examples of those there now shortly. As well as that, then the accompanying resources for the prioritised recruitment and retention strategies. We're going to show them as kind of our outputs, our results, but for example, statistical analysis plans, health economics guidance, guidance for developing a funding application. So that's what we mean by associated resources. So next slide, please, Kathleen. So the methods we specifically used for press then was as a team we got together and we said, how can we make this work? As Edu explained, it was not such an easy process because we had two different grant funders, independent but connected grants. And so we discussed the needs and the various approaches we could take and the timeline we had. And we recognised that our PPI-focused protocols would need significantly more input from our PPI partners than other protocols. So all protocols had PPI input, but these were actually co-designed and co-developed by our PPI partners, and Eda will talk more about that. And just one more click, Kathleen, there, I think. So we decided the best approach then would be, given that the resources were, subject specialist items such as health economics guidance, that we would have a subject specialist leading each particular part, but the core team would contribute to all the outputs. Next, please. And so the final outputs then were reviewed by the SWAT Trial Forge network members and PPI partners, and they were all checked for language suitability. Next slide, please. So before I discuss the results, just to say that they're all available in two places. They're available on the Trial Forge Press webpage. So if you Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever you use, Trial Forge Press project or resources, they should come up pretty easily. They're also on the open source framework. There's a specific project page, but also there's links here if you want to download this presentation when Kathleen makes it available, or there's links for downloading all these documents. And we've also submitted a journal article to the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology, and that has been accepted subject to revisions. So we're just in the process of those revisions, and everything will be available there as well when that's published. Next slide. Okay, so going to talk about 8 different outputs numbered 1 to 8. So the first one item we tackled was the master SWAT protocol template. And so we recognised, having gone through all the evidence that Edua took us through there, the various different steps, that we didn't have a template that really was suitable, that if you completed, a trial team could replicate your SWAT. So we have all SWATs are registered on the Northern Ireland SWAT repository, so it's more like a registration. It has some information, but probably not detailed enough to replicate the SWAT. So in this way, we felt it would standardise SWAT implementation and promote consistency. And also, I suppose the big thing for SWATs is replication, because we know it's not like a trial where you have a sample size calculated. These are smaller studies. They're dependent on the size of the host trial. And in that way, we need to replicate them so that we can then bring the findings together in a meta-analysis and ensure that we have enough to inform whether they're effective or not. And the other thing about having the master SWAT protocol template is it facilitates coordination of SWATs. So Edua mentioned implement SWATs, that part of her NIHR Advanced Fellowship. So she works with trial teams to simultaneously embed SWATs across multiple trials, or it can also be done sequentially. Next, please. So this is an example from that SWAT master protocol template, just so that you can see the level of detail. It'll also help trial teams if they want to write new SWAT protocols. So for instance, this is point 7, so I've just skipped to the middle here, so like the methods. So this is about participants, interventions and outcomes. On the right hand column in red there, you can see where these headings came from. So PPI partner involvement, the Cochrane retention strategy. So we looked across each of them and said, what are the key items that would need to be in a protocol for the study setting, or who can take part, for example. And within each of those points then as well, that came from the Spirit guidance, but there's guidance for the person writing the protocol, you know, about how detailed it should be or what you should include in that information. Next slide, please, Kathleen. So the second output then was the protocol, the protocols that we developed. So if you look on the left there, this is the overarching priority question that Edward mentioned, the most effective way involving patients and the public in trials to improve participant recruitment. But the SWAT protocol question then, which was chosen by the PPI partners for replication, was the effectiveness and cost effectiveness of a trial participant biography on participant recruitment rates. So we call it the BioRec study. And the link then to this protocol is available on the OSF there. So I suppose, you know, that SWAT priority question on the left-hand side, there could be other SWAT questions as well, or SWAT research questions to be answered that would address that priority question. So we recognise that. So we have selected 11 ourselves and provided the protocols for those. And like I say, these were prioritised by our group and our PPI partners. So the addressing then the best way to optimise sending, you know, trial participants invitation letters. So the question there then was around the evaluation of a theoretically informed written trial invitation compared to a standard written trial invitation, the invite study. In terms of financial incentives, the overarching theme, we looked at the wrote a protocol to the evaluation of cash-based monetary incentives to increase trial recruitment of people experiencing socioeconomic disadvantage compared to vouchers. The cash study protocol, and again this is a very good example of one that can be adapted. Perhaps it could be, you know, this is cash versus vouchers, but it could be two different types of vouchers, perhaps a paper voucher posted versus an e-voucher. So there are, you know, variations within that this protocol could easily be adapted to. And then the final recruitment one, the most effective strategies to recruit underserved groups, and we're looking at video, providing video information versus written information only, and that's the visual. So next slide, please, Kathleen. So I know now you're after counting and you saw 4 first there and you see 5 here, and that's 9, and we said we had 11. And so what we realised is, just as I said there about the cash and the monetary one, that 2 of them overlapped. Well, one was non-randomised, so we didn't produce that, and another one just overlapped, and it was so close to another research question we decided that we didn't actually need to do a separate protocol for that. They could be adapted easily, but they're all available anyway. I'm just showing you the ones that I guess are the top line original ones. So for the retention questions then, there are 5 there. The flexibility to support participant retention, that focused on in-person follow-up visit locations versus not offering that flexibility. The most effective, second one, effective way of involving patients and the public again, that was centred on effectiveness and cost effectiveness of trial newsletters co-produced with PPI. And the third one, the most effective way of using participant reminders, and so we looked at electronic reminders versus to increase questionnaire completion rates, the e-prompt study. The financial incentives, again similar, that came up in the recruitment as well, do monetary incentives increase retention compared to no monetary incentive? And the last one then is the most effective way of using routine data collection to support retention. And we looked at the shortened follow-up questionnaire versus a longer participant-reported questionnaire. So next slide, please, Kathleen. I'm going to hand back now to Edward briefly for the PPI SWATs, because Edward centred or led that from York.
Thank you, Frances. So Frances has given a great overview of the overarching SWATs, the main SWATs that we did. But as part of the UK application to the trial methodology partnership, we specifically said that we would focus on doing a couple of SWATs focused on patient and public involvement. And as part of that, we worked very closely with PPI partners who determined what the SWAT strategies should actually be. And we co-designed and co-developed the PPI SWATs very closely with them. And the purpose of the PPI strategies, as stated by our PPI partners, was that it needed to increase the SWAT strategies needed to increase trust between communities and researchers. It needed to provide education on the value of clinical trials and the benefit of participating in them. And that these strategies should have PPI involvement in tailoring the strategies, especially around the ones where for retention, where participants are being followed up. And the PPI partners also wanted the research team to explore how marketing strategies could actually help inform the behavior. It should help bring in a behavioral change lens in the strategies. Next slide, please, Kathleen. Yeah, so in terms of the methods that we use to co-produce the PPI recruitment and retention strategies, we've broken it down here in terms of what the research partners did and what the PPI partners did as well. So as a research partners, we shared the current evidence on PPI SWATs. There was a systematic review looking at the impact of patient and public involvement on recruitment and retention. So we looked at the evidence from that. And shared that with the PPI partners. We gave our PPI partners guidance on some criteria specifically for choosing the SWAT protocols, and it had to be the SWAT strategy that they were choosing to develop the protocol on had to be replicable. It had to be we had to be able to randomize the SWAT. And there were a couple of other criteria that we laid out for them to kind of help in their decision making. And we basically facilitated meetings and in between meeting tasks. For the PPI partners, they basically generated ideas on the purposes of the PPI SWATs. They also generated ideas for the potential strategies. And then they chose which PPI SWAT questions we should develop into protocols. And then they led on creating examples of possible intervention materials, so the materials that we should be using for the SWAT strategies, and provided feedback once we drafted documents. Next slide, please, Kathleen. So the agreed strategies that we kind of worked with our PPI partners on. The first one was looking at recruitment, and they selected the use of a participant biography. So one of our PPI partners had been involved in a trial as a trial participant, and he used that experience to actually draft an example biography, and which we kind of developed into the recruitment strategy. And then the second SWAT for retention looked at the use of a co-developed participant newsletter. Again, our PPI partners drafted an example newsletter, and then we used that. We kind of developed that into the formal strategy. So we mapped the PPI suggestions to other priority questions for the SWATs, and then we used behavioural change theory elements related to the PPI strategies that were proposed for the biography and the newsletter, to kind of like map it so that it aligned, or the different elements of the two strategies aligned very nicely with behavioural change theory. And then additionally, they were quite keen on clear communication. And so we developed a guide to creating the trial participant biography for the BioRic SWAT. And next slide, please, Kathleen. I'm going to return you to Francis now. Thank you.
Thanks, Edra. So ethics applications, so I suppose this is something that can be challenging depending on the region of the world you're in. And I know there are great differences between what's acceptable for a SWAT in the UK and Ireland. And so we decided that we should produce an ethics application for each of these protocols, so that I guess, you know, without that you're not going to be able to conduct it. And so we provide text within that which is suitable for UK and Ireland, but it can also be adapted to any country or region. So there isn't a lot of experience, or there aren't a lot of SWATs conducted outside of the UK and Ireland, and it would probably, well, not without looking up, I'm sure know the number of that, but where the majority really are conducted between the two countries. So I guess we have to start somewhere, but they are can be adapted to any country. And at the moment I'm working with somebody now in the United States, and Adwa also in Chicago to conduct a SWAT there. They had never heard of the concept, so it's, you know, again we've worked with them to adapt this ethics template, which has just been approved over there. So hopefully we'll get, you know, generate more evidence in other countries as well. Next slide, please, Kathleen. As part of that then, as I was saying, that issue between the UK and Ireland, we started this in advance of press, but it sort of concluded at the same time. We developed Trial Forge Guidance 5, which was ethical considerations for studies within a trial. And so we consulted with trial teams from around the world, including patient and public partners. And it was really interesting to us, actually, because all the preconceived ideas that I had, certainly, my big issue with my ethics committee was around consent, and insisting that I needed separate SWAT consent. And in fact, not just separate SWAT consent, but that the consent would have to be taken 3 times from the person approaching the person to participate, then the trial manager, and then and the PI as well. So you know, it meant that the trials weren't able to, or the SWATs weren't able to run, because, well, besides biasing the bindings, it was practically impossible. And so that's where this guidance came from. But most interesting in this, and it's an interesting read, actually our patient partners had no concern about a SWAT being conducted that they didn't know they were part of at the time, because it was so low risk, these SWATs are. But they said, no, that's not our major concern at all. But we really wanted to know after that we were involved in it, and what were the findings. So, you know, that was really interesting to see all these, like, I guess, you know, issues that we had as, you know, trying to get something through, and actually the people that would be partaking in the study had no issue at all. So that actual guidance has enabled me to get SWAT approval with my ethics committee. So if you're having challenges with your own committees, it's a good one to refer to. We have the evidence to say what matters to the participants versus what doesn't. Next slide, please, Kathleen. So the statistical analysis plans then, so these were led by Chris Sutton at University of Lancashire. And so he developed a template, for one for the recruitment and one for the retention, and these can be adapted for any of the protocols then. And next slide, please, Kathleen. And so the 6th thing then was the funding guidance, which Adwa led, and again there's text to help people applying for funding for their trial, that they're going to embed a SWAT. Justification text, budgeting advice, evidence summaries, and it has been tailored for the UK and Ireland, but again, as we get more evidence, this can be adapted as well to any location. So the seventh piece then, the health economics guidance, developed, led by Nassis Gekes, who's Adwa's PhD student, since graduated. And so, he led on this, and it's you'll have noticed most of the SWATs, the research question includes, the effectiveness and cost effectiveness, because it's a key part, is this viable or not? And the final piece, Kathleen, was guidance on making accessible documents. So, the purpose was, to support research, but we want to support inclusive research practices and reduce barriers. And so we produce this guidance as well on making accessible documents. If you just click forward there, Kathleen, and we make recommendations, on formatting, language simplification, and again, our PPI partners had a heavy involvement in this one. So next slide, please. So just we're coming to the end. I think this might be the last one, but just to bring to your attention, if you're new to SWATs, there are 5 guidance parts now that have been developed. They're called Trial Forge Guidance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first one is what's a study within a trial, which is very, very useful. The second one, we updated it recently to add that health economics component, the addition of the value of information criterion. Trial Forge Guidance 3 then is about how to recruit and retain individuals from ethnic minority groups. Trial Forge Guidance 4, guidelines for reporting studies within a trial, and I just mentioned Trial Forge Guidance 5 there a moment ago, the ethical issues in SWATs. So next slide, please. So that brings us to the end, and I suppose just a plea to everybody that's here. So you're one person. We really want to make known that these resources are available at no cost. So a lot of the work shortcutted, I guess, and so our goal is that we'd really like to see more SWATs embedded in trials. So if you can pass this on to your trial teams and people in your, in your own networks and collaboration, say, look, we have this resource, it's available. I mean, that's the best outcome that we can get from having done this work. And Adwa, you might just talk with the acknowledgements there, maybe.
Oh, thank you very much, Francis. Yeah, so if you do a SWAT, we've got a whole bunch of SWATs that we've done here at the Trial Forge SWAT Centre. And as part of my advanced fellowship, I'm going to be updating both the Cochrane Recruitment Review and the Cochrane Retention Review going forward. And it'd be fantastic if you do a SWAT. You can get in touch with us if you're planning on doing a SWAT. We can help you develop your protocols using the press resources. And if you do a SWAT, please share your findings with us so we can actually make sure we include it in the future updates of the Cochrane Review. We're also developing guidelines for evidence-based recruitment and retention based on these SWATs. So if anyone's interested, this is a cheeky plug. If anyone's interested in joining the guideline development group, please do get in touch as well. I'll drop the email address in the chat box. The main thing is, please use the resources as Francis has said. And if you do a SWAT, please share it with us. So it's a swash.group@york.ac.uk. But I'll drop it in the chat box again. And we're funded, obviously, in the acknowledgements. We're funded by the Trial Methodology Partnership and the Trial Methodology Research Network in the UK. And I'm also funded by the NIHR. So, thank you.